This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 359. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Battlefield 6's sales record, new Exodus info, a new Pokemon game is out, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Let's jump into the gaming news. Kind of a slow week this week. We'll see how long this one lasts. We've had some rather long podcasts lately. I suspect this one won't be one of them, but the coming weeks will probably change that. We're going to start off with Battlefield 6 sets franchise record sales numbers. EA put out an official press release that in the first 3 days, so over the weekend basically, they sold 7 million copies of Battlefield 6. That is a pretty big deal. Steam alone had peaked out at almost 800,000 players, which is a lot for any game, but especially, a Battlefield game. This is a big bounce back for them, right? Like 2042 was pretty universally heralded as not being what a lot of people wanted. Throwing it out there, I actually like 2042 quite a bit. There's even some stuff from 2042 I kind of wish they would have carried over to 6 when it came just some gameplay stuff and some quality of life things. I suspect over time, some of the things like UI and some of the little things they'll kind of figure out. Player visibility is a big one that I feel like in 2042 you could see other players really easily. Maybe I don't know why. I'm not smart enough to know why that is, but I've just noticed that this new one, sometimes it's a little hard to see people. But overall, it's a real blast. I totally understand why it's selling so well. I mean, I would say this game's on track for probably 15 million. I wouldn't be surprised in the long run. Obviously, how they handle the live service side, that we'll see what this supposed free-to-play battle royale will do later this month or even next month. I don't know. I don't think people who would play that and not buy the main game would ever have bought the game anyways. So at the end of the day, assuming it's going to be monetized with crates or cosmetics or whatever, I suspect it's only going to help in that fashion. We'll see how they. My biggest fear is that the live service side of the Battlefield 6 multiplayer could suffer from the live service or the battle royale, if it means less maps for multiplayer, less new guns and cosmetics and gadgets and vehicles and all that stuff. That's the only thing I'm really worried about. At the end of the day, I suspect it's going to end up being a pretty lucrative thing for them. And from what we've seen, it looks pretty interesting. I was really into Blackout, the pre-Warzone Call of Duty Battle Royale. I've never gotten into Warzone. I've honestly tried. I think the fact that I mostly matchmake is a big issue. I think a lot of people who play those modes really heavily have like a crew they play with, which I guess I could find one. I think I even have some like real life, acquaintances that I could probably pull into playing with me. I don't know. The time I play is when most people are asleep for the most part, or like, during times I probably shouldn't be playing. But I have never gotten super interested in Warzone. Back in the PUBG or the Division survival days, like that was kind of neat. Apex Legends is honestly the game that pulled me in the most for the longest amount of time. In the game I went back to the most often. I've kind of retired myself from that game. It kind of got away from me, and I've kind of had my time with it, right? But this Battlefield BR has the best chance to pull me into something, I think. There's something unique about just conquest and now breakthrough and some of the modes and escalation, now the new mode they have, that I just prefer that. It's not even like more casual. It's just I like those modes because you can kind of pick a role and do that. You want to be the anti-vehicle guy, you go out there and do your anti-vehicle stuff. You want to cap points or be a vehicle driver, or just death match it and try to kill as many infantry as you can. You can do all those things, and you can do those and still help the team for the most part. And in the other, battle royale is so like, especially if you're a matchmaker like me, who knows what you're gonna get, right? Like, so many like Apex Legends, we get to the final 3 teams or whatever, and they just get demolished because we were three randoms playing with each other, depending on pings to, tell each other what's going on. I'm just really curious to how well they design this to not just work for people who team up with their friends, or especially streamers and content creators and things like that, where so many of these modes seem like they're so overly obsessed with those people, because it's good for marketing and PR and all that. I don't know. Regardless, 7 million sales over a weekend can't be a bad thing, for hopefully the developers, and with all the stuff going on at EA, which we will talk about in a few stories. You can't, unfortunately, be completely confident that just because your game does well that you're safe. We've learned, but it certainly can't hurt. So hopefully this is good for all the people who worked on this, and for the future of those studios. My own take: I've played, I have to imagine, 20 or 25 hours so far. Not as many as some freaks out there, but definitely a decent amount. The multiplayer, I've got some criticism, some things I hope they adjust and change as time goes on. But overall, it's so great. I really enjoy it. You play around, and for me at least once around, something happens where I, hit a moving shot on a tank and blow it up, or I come around, I flank, and I come around the corner and I can take out like 5, enemy players. And like a really cool, like, I take out like 3 of them with my main gun. I blow up one with a grenade I threw before I even started shooting, and then I take out the last one with a pistol. Like, you have those moments, and it's like, oh yeah, you hit that clip button so you can show it later. It has those moments, and that's what I'm looking for from the multiplayer. Challenges and stuff, there's like weekly and daily challenges, and then just general ones as well. When I do those, I get kind of obsessed with them. And there was a weekly this week that, there are 2 of them, one that required you to play Domination and another that required King of the Hill. And I don't know if there's 2 worse, more frustrating modes to play in a video game than those 2 modes in Battlefield. It's just, I feel like those kind of modes are fit so well for like more of an arcadey, fast-paced game, such as Call of Duty. I really don't think those games belong in the Battlefield world, and especially don't make them. They're not required, but they feel required if you want to really fully level up with challenges and stuff. They kind of force you into them, and I wish they didn't do that. So that's some minor complaints, but overall I have a blast. I'm logging on every day and playing for a few hours. The campaign, I believe I'm on the last mission. I've actually recorded all of it. I'm going to cut it together and post it on my YouTube probably next week sometime. If you are trying to compare this single player to like the 2019 Modern Warfare reboot, which is just like, I would argue, basically perfect, or at least very, very, very good, or even the really impressive like Black Ops 6 single player from last year, or just any other single player games, it's not going to fare well. The Battlefield 6 campaign is not going to fare well when compared to other games. If you want to compare it back to like the Battlefield, I think 3 and 4 had campaigns, Hardline had a campaign, 2042 kind of famously didn't. It holds up a little better. It's no worse, I guess. What's hard about it is that the first mission I didn't find to be very fun. Then there's a few missions you go through where it's like, okay, this is fine. This is okay. This is kind of neat, I guess. They're using some of the mechanics from the multiplayer in some kind of interesting ways. There's some beautiful, areas we're playing in here. Like, okay, this is cool. And now I'm in what I presume is the final mission. And the second half of this campaign, it kind of feels like they just didn't have time to finish it. Like, there's a tank section towards the end, I believe, when you're in Egypt and you're going through, and like, it's pretty rough. Like it's not, I don't think it's very fun. You are driving down this highway, taking out these checkpoints and these overpasses before you go into an urban area. And if you look around too much, you're like, oh no, because there's a point where you're going down this highway and the focus is the highway, these overpasses that have been fortified in the bases. You're taking out tanks and vehicles and anti-tank missile launchers and stuff. Like, so if you stay focused on the task, it's okay. But if you look around at all, you look over and you see what's supposed to be like a little like suburban town area, and it's the same building 100 times, and it's like real low poly, low level of detail. Oh man, that's really ugly. Like, it looks really bad. It looks horrendous, actually. I don't know. There's just a lot of with the single player, the campaign of Battlefield 6. I think if you put your blinders on completely and you just power through exactly what it wants you to do at every moment, and you don't look around too much, it's fine, I guess. But man, like if you try to explore the levels at all, if you deviate too far, either you'll get like a screen that says you're leaving the mission area, or you'll just go into these multiple locations where there's these like open areas, or there's these like, there'll be like an alleyway or a hallway or steps. You'll go to it and there's just nothing. And like, I'm a big fan of how Call of Duty does a lot of this stuff with their single player. They make it pretty linear. There may be some illusion of openness or whatever. I think was it Modern Warfare 2 where there was like open areas, or maybe it was Modern Warfare 3. I can't remember. The more recent ones. And like that felt okay. It wasn't really what I wanted from Call of Duty though, right? And yeah, the Battlefield 6 campaign, like when IGN gave it a 5 out of 10, and I saw who reviewed it, who I think is kind of like, I don't know, I don't really trust their reviews very much. I have to admit, like, yeah, it's probably a pretty fair score. I may tick it up a bit, maybe the ending. What they're trying to do with this campaign is explain why you're fighting in the cities you're fighting in multiplayer. I presume it'll have something to do with the Battle Royale mode as well. Like they're trying to give context, which is fine, where like Battlefield 2042 had no context. Like you got the smallest bits of lore from these like, you could get these these like intel bits and stuff and read through it, which I never did until I finished playing Battlefield 2042. After I was done, I hit max level for the battle pass for Battlefield 6. I unlocked everything, and then like literally before I deleted the game from my Xbox, I was like, yeah, I should look through this codex, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. So admittedly, that's my fault that maybe that wasn't ideal. So I'm glad they're trying to give more context to the story. I kind of wish they would have done something more like what they did with like Battlefield 1, the World War I game, where they had these like, I don't know if you'd call them like vignettes or whatever. They had, it was a handful of these like fairly fast missions, 20 to 30 minutes, but they were like really heavily crafted and very character focused and like really, really like intense short experiences. Now, obviously it's World War I, so how much context do they really need to give? But they were still introducing you to game mechanics and things like that, tank warfare and so on and so forth. And I feel like something like that again would have been way better, because instead we have this like, I don't know if you'd call them like vignettes or whatever. They had these like fairly fast missions, 20 to 30 minutes, but they were like really heavily crafted and very character focused and like really, really like intense short experiences. Now, obviously it's World War I, so how much context do they really need to give? But they were The best way I can describe it is it feels like an Xbox 360 single player experience. It's just the AI is abysmal from friendly and enemy. Uh, there was something I feel like I have to push back on a little bit. Before the game came out, one of the content creators who had the game early showed a mission where, if you remember back to the 2019 Call of Duty Modern Warfare reboot, there was this really cool mission that took place in a house where you, at nighttime, and I think it was in London, you and this team quietly go through this house from the basement to the attic, and you're clearing it, and it's very tactical and it's scripted a lot, so it, like, you can't run ahead and try to play, like jump around corners and all that. It like forced you to be very methodical and tactical, and he had to make choices, and he had to determine, like, is that a civilian, or are they going for a gun, or are they trying to save a baby, like, what are you doing? And then you get to the end, and the mission culminates. And before the release of Battlefield 6, a content creator posted a mission, or a snippet from a mission from Battlefield 6, that looked like they were trying to mimic the same thing. And of course, the player just runs through, vaulting over everything, jumping around corners, firing, hip fire, doing all this. And so I remember seeing that, being like, oh, what are they doing? Like, you shouldn't be trying to copy Call of Duty in that way. They obviously, it's just more polished. They have a more polished experience when it comes to the single player. Then I actually played that mission in Battlefield 6. And while, like, they could have made it more moody and more interesting, that moment when you're clearing that house is in the middle of this way bigger mission. That's a when you've gotten to that point, you kind of know what Battlefield 6 is all about. And it's not going to be this gritty tactical experience. So by that point, you kind of, like, they give you in that mission before that happens, but the clip that was shown, they give you a sledgehammer, and they're like, bust down doors with this. So, like, literally you can run through the house just busting down doors and then shooting people behind them. So, like, the single player may not be as bad as you've seen people talk about it being. Maybe some people, I've also seen some people, and I don't know if they're being, like, ironic or not, be like, wow, this is such a cool experience. And that's all. I'm also kind of like, kind of pushing back on both sides here. I'm kind of like, oh man, what I'll say about the single player, because I've been talking about it for 10 minutes, it feels like it's worth going through. There's a bunch of rewards attached to it. I think that's what kind of annoys me. There's a ton of, like, cosmetics and stuff attached to it. So very likely I'm going to beat it, and then I'm going to look back and see what all the challenges are to unlock the rest of the stuff. I'll probably go back, because I hate myself, and do most, if not all, of that stuff. And then it gives you, when you finish a campaign, it literally pops up a window, from what I've seen, that lets you delete just the campaign so that your file size is smaller. So my goal is to finish the campaign, see what it's all about, then go back and do at least the little missions that you have to do, or the achievements or challenges, just to unlock all the cosmetics is what I'm really going to shoot for. And then I'll never think about the single player ever again for the rest of my life. So there's my thoughts on that. There have been some interesting developments since the release. They've already released a few patches to adjust and fix a few things that people either were complaining about or that were, like, legitimate bugs. One interesting thing is console and PC users who are using the Cronus Max device, which is essentially a hardware cheating device that you can use on console or PC. They're getting banned. So there must be some hardware identifier, to the point where the Cronus Max developers on their forum were, like, freaking out and, like, telling people, like, hey, don't use this with that game, because you're going to get banned and you're going to lose, that $70 game you paid for. You're not going to get your money back, and you're not going to be able to play it anymore. So that's cool if you are into the competitive side of things at all. And the last thing I'll say is, I just wish so badly, in my For You or my suggested page on social media, I could just ban all Call of Duty and Battlefield fan accounts and, like, content creator accounts, because good Lord, I've never seen a collection of worst takes. And it's not even just being negative about the game. Like, you don't have to like the game. I don't care. That's fine. Good for you. Good for me. We're both happy, whatever. But, like, the number of, I genuinely believe that a bunch of the Call of Duty players that they, like, worked with or gave early access to for this game, or some kind of attention, I genuinely believe that there's like a contest happening amongst the Call of Duty content creators to see who can have the dumbest take about the game. And it was really interesting on like Sunday, a bunch of them. So I assume their benefits were no longer happening, after the release. And it was almost like copy and paste from like dozens and dozens of Call of Duty content creators being like, I don't really see what all the hype around BF6 was. And it's just like, look, that's fine. You don't have to like the game. But like some of the things you would see, like there's like there's Call of Duty content creators being like, what Battlefield really needs is kill streaks. It's like, come on, man. Like, no, like you don't get it. And that's what makes it most frustrating to hear these people talk about it when it's fine. It's not for everyone. Just like Call of Duty isn't for everyone. They're, different audiences they're shooting for, but like you can't expect one to be the other. Right. And a lot of the takes, I genuinely don't believe most of the takes are genuine. I think that they're just trying to clickbait and go off king, I guess, however you want to look at it. But like, it's been rough out there. Now, here in a week or two, a lot of that will die down. The player numbers are going to drop a lot for Battlefield 6. It is I don't want to call it a niche game, but it's not Call of Duty. It is, as much as I've seen people trying to be like, oh, Call of Duty has this high skill. Oh God, what's the phrase everyone's been using? The ability to express your skill level is better in Call of Duty. Like, whatever, man. If you diving around corners and sliding and, doing 360s in the air and shooting people in the head, if you feel like that's like an expression of skill, that's cool. I guess it is in its own way, right? Not everyone's looking to do that. I'm almost 40. The battle dad moniker, I guess, would go for me. I prefer the still chaotic, but maybe a bit more grounded experience that you get from Battlefield. So it's all going to calm down. Battlefield 6 appears to already be a huge success. We'll see what that means here in the future. Okay, our second story is Exodus is now available on all platforms for wishlisting. So if you don't know what Exodus is, it is an upcoming RPG game being made by Archetype Studios. They are under the Hasbro publisher, which is interesting. That's also who owns Wizards of the Coast, who licensed out to Larian for Baldur's Gate 3 and is supposedly making a Baldur's Gate 4 with an internal studio. But back over to Archetype. Archetype is a studio mostly made up of a bunch of industry vets, especially it's mostly BioWare veterans. And so the main one being Drew Karpyshyn, who was the writer for the trilogy of Mass Effect, as well as the rest of their senior leadership, I think are mostly BioWare people from the trilogy and Dragon Age days, Mass Effect trilogy and Dragon Age days. I have some thoughts about this game. So just to talk about what's new, you can now wishlist the game on Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, I assume other places as well, anywhere that you get your games. They put up a new Q&A where they talked about like stealth and how it's like a part of the game, but it's not forced on you. They keep reiterating that like choices are a big deal here. One of the main premises of this game is that it's probably going to be like a Mass Effect-ish game where you have like dialogues and that affects the story and all that. The hook here appears to be, or the gimmick or whatever you call it, is that the game is likely going to take place in chunks from different eras. So the whole idea is this like time dilation thing where the game will start, you'll make some choices in that part of the game, something will happen where you'll go like way far in the future, and then you'll see the results of those choices, and then you'll have to make more choices, and those will stack, and so on and so forth, along whatever narrative they're going to be telling. They also talked about like side missions and how, they're commonly thought of as filler missions, which they likely will be in this game as well. But they really emphasized like, hey, like these are the missions that are most important for you to get to know your crewmates and so on and so forth. So, definitely very Mass Effect coded there. And they're not really hiding that. They released some new screenshots and key art, and the key art and what I assume will be the cover of the game for Exodus is literally the Mass Effect 1 cover modernized with their own characters and so on. So, I assume this was a very purposeful nod to where they all came from, but I still thought it was kind of interesting. And at this point, I believe during an investor call with Hasbro, that there was a mention that this game Exodus is expected in 2026. I don't believe the devs or the actual studio has ever said that. But then putting everything on the wish list, it says like coming soon, all this stuff. I suspect they'll be announcing a release date maybe at the Game Awards this year in December, and then the game comes out probably next summer ish. I feel like kind of an outsider with this game. I got into the Mass Effect community back in 2021 when Legendary Edition came out. It was the first time I really played the franchise heavily in any way. And I used to be the Division content creator, and then I kind of generalized when Mass Effect came out. I've really focused on Mass Effect, BioWare, their next game, it was Veilguard. Now it's hopefully the next Mass Effect game. We'll talk about the rest of that situation in a bit. And games that are similar have kind of popped out to me, right? And Exodus was one of the first ones. I believe it got announced back in, I think, 2023. And so we're a couple years in now. This studio was one of those studios. If you remember back in like the 2020 era, like before COVID or during COVID, there were like dozens of these studios of like, here's this new AAA studio founded by a bunch of veteran game developers who, cashed out their stocks from their studio that was acquired by Xbox or whatever, like, or EA or whoever. And there were all these studios that popped up that were trying to do AAA games as an indie studio. A lot of them were getting money from like Tencent and other investors because loans were cheap. Money was cheap back then. And it was easy to get. And there were literally dozens of these studios that got announced, including, if another BioWare kind of legend, Casey Hudson had, or was it? Oh, of course I'm going to forget it in this moment. His studio that shut down at the end of 2024, Humanoid Origin. That's what it was eventually called. And they're like all of them shut down. Like of those dozens and dozens of studios, I don't know if any of them, I think maybe a handful released games. A couple still exist, including Archetype and a couple others. But most of them are gone and never even released a game. Casey Hudson studio, Humanoid Origin, showed off some concept art for a game, literally never announced the game, even though they were around for like 4 or 5 years. They're gone. Now they're gone. And we've heard nothing from him or anyone that worked there. And we haven't really seen where those people went and stuff like that. So, kind of weird. So for Archetype to survive, it's because they're under Hasbro. I don't know if they started off that way or if they got acquired at some point. But I've been so skeptical of this game. And this year especially did that to me because this summer, Owlcat Games, who's made like the Warhammer Rogue Trader games and some others, announced this The Expanse Osiris Reborn, which it's based in the Expanse universe, which is very Mass Effect coded, right? And it looks like it's a modern Mass Effect game from what we've seen. It looks really, really cool. And we have found out more about that game in the last 4 months than we know about Mass Effect 5 over the last 5 years, and more than we know about Exodus over the last 3 or 4 years. And like, that wouldn't be so annoying or concerning to me if Exodus and Archetype were kind of just being quiet, saying, hey, we're working on it. When we have stuff to show you, we'll show you. But instead, they've done a bunch of these like extracurricular things. They've released a couple books, which can work. You're establishing the universe and so on and so forth, I guess. They've released like an art book. They have this like founders program that they push pretty hard. And they've been doing these Q&As where they just like wax poetic about like what they hope they can do with this game. And when, this game is likely a year out, and some of these Q&As they do, even fairly recent ones, to me, it sounds like they're talking about a game they've like not even started making yet. Like they do so much of this chatter of like, yeah, we hope that we can do this and that. And it's like, guys, I hope that like you've scaled this at this point. Like, I hope if you can do that by now or not. And I don't know. They've just been doing so much tell and so little show. And that worries me because, I've been covering games for a long time. I've seen this before. I've seen, this thing where these developers have these huge hopes, these gigantic aspirations for their game. And then in this case, you have like all these Mass Effect content creators and influencers and fans, like just, drooling over this game. Like, oh, I think I'm more excited for Exodus than the next Mass Effect, or, this or that, these statements, which is fine. Not hating, all good. But like, I really think those people, those content creators, those fans are setting themselves up for disappointment. And I think that Archetype is playing with fire, because it's the first game for a new studio. Even though they're a bunch of vets, it's still a new studio. Things are different. It's not like being at a studio that's been around for a decade or more, right? They don't know their processes. They don't know what they're doing. They're figuring things out still, right? And I'm afraid this game's going to come out and it's going to be like a 5 out of 10, and it's going to feel like an indie game. It's not going to quite feel AAA. It's not going to quite look AAA, because what they've shown us so far doesn't look AAA to me, and that, which is fine. It doesn't have to be, but that's kind of how they've portrayed it. And I just have this kind of feeling in my gut that this game could end up being cool, could end up being neat, have some cool concepts, but I just really doubt it's going to fulfill what everyone has put on it, both the developers and the fans and the content creators. And I just feel like that's such a bad recipe, where instead, they I want to say they should have just shut up and worked on it and then shown the stuff when they could show it. But you also have to build the brand. Like, it's a tough situation, right? I just, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, to be clear. I hope I'm completely wrong about Exodus. I hope it comes out. It's the best game anyone's ever played. It makes people forget that there's even BioWare. That BioWare doesn't even exist in their brains anymore, because Exodus is so good, so well executed. Boom. Who even needs BioWare anymore? I'm joking. Please, EA, keep them. Don't be jerks, right? But like, what I mean. I hope I'm completely wrong, that my skepticism looks really stupid in hindsight. I genuinely feel that way. My gut tends to be pretty solid from my own experience and my own bias, of course. So we'll see. I'm sure we have more news coming for Exodus extremely soon, and I'll talk about it when they give it. Next up, we have Helldivers 2, has some updates getting pushed back. Arrowhead announced in this last week that they are delaying new content in order to work on the efficiency and health of the game. So there's been complaints for quite a while now about the performance of Helldivers 2 just not being very good. I believe this is mostly on PC. There's a lot of reasons for this. One thing that I think people will constantly forget is that Helldivers 2 is on a like a retired, like defunct engine that they literally like brought back from the dead, basically, and was never ever intended to make a game like this game. It's this really, I'd have to look up the details again, but it's an engine for a game like from games that came out like a really long time ago, and they just updated it and they did a great job. The game looks great. It plays really fun. It's amazing what they did, but that also put them on kind of the back foot, because as far as I know, like they're having to engineer the engine on their own because it's defunct. It's no one's maintaining it. It's not, no one's adding features to it that they can just use. If they were using Unity or Unreal Engine, where there's like actual people working on the engine to improve it in theory, and they can just use those updates. That's not the case. Like they are making and maintaining this engine basically. That has led to issues like the file size being very, very, very bloated for the game, especially on PC, which they're working on as well as just some general performance issues, which again, like this game, for better or worse, is being held together with like duct tape, because they're just trying to make all these nodes work on this engine, work together, and they're trying to update it and make it work better. And now they've added on the consoles and all that, this isn't the first time this has happened. If you're a Rainbow Six Siege fan, the Division 2, I think even PUBG did this, where like Rainbow Six Siege had, I think it was called Operation Health or whatever, where they literally took like 6 months off and they just worked on getting the game in better shape with like, multiplayer with netcode, latency, all that stuff, like balancing of the different operators and things like that. I don't know how much it really helped in the long run. If I remember correctly, the overall feeling was that it didn't really do that great of a job. That was kind of a similar story with the Division 2. At one point, they kind of announced like, hey, the game's in tough shape. We've stacked a lot of stuff on top of it that it wasn't meant to have. So we're going to take a few months from development. We're going to push back like a DLC and other stuff. And we're just going to try to fix up the game. It has done nothing. I'm sure on their end, on their side, they probably fixed some things that were long time issues. And that's good. I have no doubt about that. From a customer facing thing, it doesn't appear to have made any difference at all. That game is still struggling under its own weight. So I kind of wonder if this is really going to matter that much. Arrowhead appears to be extremely talented developers, and they've been pretty good about backing up what they say. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do a good job here and it ends up being better. We'll just have to wait to see. Helldivers 2 is a really great game. If you haven't played it yet, you should at least try it out. I fell off of it. I got my fill of it. I can only run the same missions over and over again to a certain point, and even the updates they've done, I haven't found to be all that great. I was ready to jump back in with Xbox. I was like, oh, cool, it's coming to Xbox. I'll be able just to play it on my console. I won't have to worry about firing up my PC and all that. And then they announced it wouldn't have any cross progression, which is just like, it's 2025, man. And this is just, I won't go off on it because I don't feel like being a console war fanboy today, but like, PlayStation is so strange with this stuff, man. Like, they are so weird about allowing games have cross progression and things like that, especially a multi-platform game that's for multiplayer. Like, it makes no sense to me. It never has. I think it's insane that in 2025 they're still doing this stuff, but they can't do any wrong. I literally saw like no pushback on this, even though this kind of thing should be absolutely standard at this point. Even if it's just like a one-time sync, like if they would let me sync it one time, and maybe I don't even need like daily progression syncs or whatever. Like, give it to me one time. Let me buy the game once on Xbox. I get one opportunity to sync it with my PC tune. I'll never play on PC again. I'll just play on Xbox. I'm happy as can be. But I canceled a pre-order because of this. I don't want to grind that game for another 60, 70 hours. It's a cool game. It is not worth playing that much again, but that's just me. Arc Raiders is having their server slam event here a couple weeks before they release the full game. If you remember, this game kind of took the gaming world by storm over the summer when they did a public test. It coincided or was like right after the marathon test, Bungie's kind of similar extraction type game, and just dusted it, like just completely. I played both. Marathon was the most boring game I've ever played in my entire life. It felt bad to play. I thought it was kind of ugly. It's insane that they made that instead of Destiny 3. Like that's kind of an outsider opinion. I know that and I'm sure there's lots of reasons, with PlayStation's live service push, as much of a disaster as that has been, all this stuff. I'm sure there's reasons they did Marathon. Maybe the devs just don't want to do Destiny anymore. I get it. It's fine. But like, it was so wild over the summer seeing, because Marathon was pretty hyped up. People were excited for it. It's a Bungie game. A lot of people love Bungie games, whether it's the old Halos or Destiny or whatever. And then this kind of upstart studio who has the finals, which was more popular than I thought it was, that they put that game out basically to raise money for Arc Raiders. Then they put out Arc Raiders, which is this game that like, it's really punishing. It's very Tarkov-esque. It's hard. Like, I think Arc Raiders is very challenging. It's very brutal, and it's a game that I wouldn't have expected to turn a lot of people on, and it did. And not only did it, but it also, like, just the comparison was just so rough for Marathon. Like, because Marathon was bad. Like, I think it was an objectively bad experience. Some people seem to love it. That's cool, but it just, I don't know. I didn't get it. So now they're doing this test for Arc Raiders. It releases here at the end of the month. They can't be loving their release window at this point, being after Battlefield, right before Call of Duty. They're gonna struggle for attention here, but they do a good job. And Arc Raiders doesn't need to be the biggest game it's ever sold. It just needs to find its audience, which I think it will. I've jumped into the Server Slam. It's essentially a beta or an early access thing, but you don't get to keep your progression. And you can tell, like, they have really polished this game up so much. I did my first playtest of this game. It had to have been 3 years ago, if not more. And it was bad. Like, and as you would expect from like a pre-alpha level game. But it had, like, I could tell, like, I could see where they were going with it. Like, okay, like, I can see what they're trying to do here. It just isn't there yet. Then I think last year they did a test where it was way more polished and a lot of fun. And then earlier this year they did another test where I was like, dang man, like they've really brought this game together. They've like figured out what they want this game to be, which was pretty neat. And now they're about to release in this test. It's what's funny, what's going to happen with this game is it's going to come out and people are going to be like, wait, Unreal Engine 5 can be really pretty and run really well. And it's going to make a lot of developers and studios look really bad because this relative, I don't think it's a small studio that we're working with here that is making Arc Raiders. But they're definitely not one of these big giant heralded studios that has all this history, right? But this game, it runs phenomenally. I've played it on PC and on Xbox. I've most recently played it on Series X, and it runs amazing. It looks incredibly good. It's a neat game. So if you have any interest at all in checking out, one of these extraction games, kind of seeing what that world is about, the kind of survival, build up your home base, take things into this world and then try to bring them all back, as well as some other stuff, or you die and you lose everything. That happened to me on my very first run in this server slam. And that's just the way it goes. You get some new gear and you start again, right? One of the big things they took away was like Escape from Tarkov has a similar vibe. You have a character, you have gear, you take that gear in. If you hope to go in, complete some missions, get some new gear, take it out, put it back in your home base, stock yourself up. But if you die during one of those, outings, you lose everything that was on your body. You also get a character in Tarkov called a scav. And so that is a random generated character that gets thrown into a map. And if you get out, you get to keep everything you get with that character. But if you die, you lose literally everything. And you get no progression on your main character. Well, Arc Raiders had that in almost all of their tests for a long time now, where you would get like a random kit and you had no slots that were like guaranteed keeps. And then, and if you got out, you got to keep all that stuff. If you didn't, you didn't. And you got no progression, right? They don't have that anymore. So that kind of character, that mechanic is nice. Because if you run out of gear with your main character, it's a good way to go. Just stock up a little bit, just grab some guns, grab some armor, so that you can use your main character to go in and do real stuff. It looks like that's gone as far as I can tell. So I'll be curious to how that plays out in the long run. I'm really excited about Arc Raiders. I have such a fun rest of the year lined up for me. I've got Battlefield it has a battle pass coming up and all the stuff you can grind with that. Arc Raiders will be this nice kind of change of pace to go in and do those things. The Battlefield BR as well will be a nice little change of pace thing. And then we have Outer Worlds 2 coming out here soon, so I can get my RPG, kind of feels in there. I'm excited, and it should be a fun rest of the year. Microsoft is reportedly moving Surface production, their kind of tablet, laptop products, out of China. And the rumor is, and the way it relates to gaming, is that they're very likely going to do this with Xbox as well. And that makes complete sense. If you see everyone moaning and groaning about how Xbox has raised the price of their consoles 5 years after they were announced and released, that's because, one, they probably don't have much stock out there. And two, the only place they can make their new stock is in China. And when they ship that over, it has huge tariffs on it. Because like a lot of electronics and like PC parts have exemptions on them, but for some reason consoles don't. So if you make a console in China and ship it over here, it gets hit with a big tariff, which is why the Xbox Series X is now like $650, which is insane. Whereas if you shipped over PC parts, it wouldn't be the same. So that's a different discussion, probably for a different day, but it's still kind of interesting to be aware of. It's very likely, I assume, that Xbox and PlayStation, all of these brands are, if they haven't already, are going to try to move their manufacturing to like a Vietnam or an India or something like that to try to avoid those tariffs. What's really interesting is that if the rumors that a new Xbox could be coming as soon as 2026 are true, there's a possibility that the next gen Xbox could come out and be priced at like $599, and the Series X could still be $649. Just because if this new hardware gets made in a country that isn't tariffed, it can be brought in for a more reasonable price. But any of the remaining Xboxes, Series X's that are out there, or Series S's, will still be stock that got shipped in with a huge tariff. Therefore, the margins on it are god awful, and they have to charge all this extra for it. What that's going to mean is that there's just going to be a bunch of the few Series X's and S's that appear to even be getting made at this point will end up just sitting on shelves, and maybe getting severely discounted one day once their shelf presence is more expensive than their, what they're going to lose on their profit margin. But I mean, this makes sense. I fully expect this to happen. I wouldn't be surprised at all. They're not going to bring it here. If you made an Xbox or a PlayStation in the United States, it's kind of like that whole argument about the iPhone. Oh, just make iPhones here in the United States. It's like, well, your $1,200 iPhone will now be $2,500. So if you want to pay $2,500 for an iPhone, then sure, we can make it here eventually. It would take years to do that. It's a similar thing with the consoles. It's, maybe you could, bring parts here and assemble them relatively efficiently, but just with, prices that you have to pay workers and stuff like that, you're talking about a $600 console would become a $1,000, $1,200 console really, really quickly. So, we'll be seeing what non-American country they move this manufacturing to for the Surface, and we'll see if they do the same thing with the Xbox. It's worth remembering that we are at least under some impression that the Surface team has been involved in the development of the next-gen console, even though that was widely believed to be the next-gen, the Xbox first-party handheld, which has supposedly been canceled. And that might be a legit rumor, because AMD was going to require them to order so much hardware for those. They were going to require them to order, I believe it's 10 million units, which is twice as many units as like Steam Decks and most of the other handhelds have sold total in the last 5 years. So they would never do that, because they're not going to sell that many, no matter how good it is. So we'll see what happens with that. And presumably we'll see what happens with all the tariffs and all of that as well. Pokemon Legends Z to A has released. It has an open critic score of 81. That's relatively low for what you would expect from like a first party Pokemon, first party Nintendo game. But for what I've seen from this game, it probably fits. Basically what I've read and what I've seen reviews on is it's a cool experience. It's the closest we've ever gotten to like a real-time combat Pokemon game, because it essentially is. That kind of mimics what you always imagined when watching the cartoon and stuff like that. It's not the straight up turn-based battle system like in the more classic games. It definitely has more of that like real-time feel, which the people who have played it have really enjoyed. It's been really interesting seeing people talk about the game, because like in one breath they'll say like, oh, it's beautiful, it's cool, it's so cool to be in this world, and then in the next breath they're like, it also kind of looks like a Wii game. So it's like the performance on the Switch 2 apparently is pretty good. Apparently it's pretty bad on the Switch 1, which is to be expected. And but don't you dare think that Nintendo is going to leave behind those 150 million users who still have Switches, right? I also think at this point, if you're a Switch Nintendo gamer, there's no way that you're like a frames per second or a resolution freak. Like I assume at this point you've just accepted that you're just behind the 8 ball on that, which is fine. If the game is fun and you like it, all good. It's just the reception of this game and the lead up to it has been interesting. They did these press events where they would let these podcasters and journalists stuff like play it for like 10 minutes. Which is weird. When you do these kind of events, you typically let people play for like an hour or more. And they made them do, I think it was like 2 or 3 like 5 to 10 minute snippets of the game. Like literally never enough to really understand the game or get a real feel for it. That honestly made me worry that when this actually released, it was going to review really badly, because they were just clearly trying to hide the game from people. But that doesn't appear the case. That doesn't appear to be the case. It seems like it's a good game. It's not going to be game of the year, and no one ever thought it was going to be. And if you're a Pokemon freak, get your freak on. Next up, we have the Assassin's Creed longtime franchise lead. I'm going to butcher this name, so just deal with it. Mark Alexis Cote, I assume, has been forced to leave Ubisoft. And in a statement I saw after this was announced, he claims it wasn't his choice to leave. This is someone who's been kind of the lead on the Assassin's Creed franchise for 20 years, so like most of it. And this doesn't smell great, in my opinion, because it comes after this whole deal with Ubisoft and Tencent, where they agreed to make like a subsidiary publisher that would focus on the development and publishing, like this co-publishing agreement between Tencent and Ubisoft that would focus on their big franchises: Rainbow Six Siege, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry, I believe. And this definitely feels like, in theory, that means they've reconsolidated those studios and stuff, because so now you have to keep this in mind. And they just announced the name of this new group. I can't remember what it is. Sue me. But now you have to keep in mind. So basically, Ubisoft is two different companies now, kind of within each other, but for the sake of conversation, there's a part of Ubisoft that makes Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and the Rainbow Six games. And then there's the other part of Ubisoft that's everything else. So like The Division, all their licensed games like the Star Wars and Avatar, and anything else, Ghost Recon and stuff, I assume. And Tencent did this deal because the three that are on their own now are the ones that make all of Ubisoft's money, and all the other ones aren't. So when you see a move like this, where they've done this move, and now one of those franchises that they've put into this bubble, now you take out the dude who's been leading it for 20 years, especially after they had Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I loved. It's one of my favorite games this year, and it performed well, it reviewed well, it sold well as far as we can tell. It's not even like they just put out a bad game and he's getting booted for that. It seems like there's other stuff at play here, and I just, man, that deal, I have a feeling in 10 years we're going to look back and be like, ugh, like Ubisoft was messaging something to all of us that we just weren't willing to see yet. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm a big fan of like The Division. I think Ubisoft Massive is Ubisoft's best studio to this day. I think the Avatar game was really cool for what it was. I think the Star Wars game is way underrated. I think it's extremely good. And The Division 1 and 2, I think, are a couple. I think that franchise in general could be one of the biggest things for Ubisoft if they would ever let it be. I'm hoping for a Division 3. They claim they're making it. We've seen no progress on that, but we'll have to wait and see. I worry. I have to be honest. I really worry for them, and for a Division 3. And man, they just keep dragging the corpse of Division 2 along and keep trying to shove more content into it. We'll see. I hope it works out, because I like Ubisoft. Admittedly, I was a star player. They took me to E3 back in 2018. So full discretion there, I guess. But there aren't too many of these independent publishers left, because they've all got purchased by PlayStation and Xbox and Tencent and Embracer Group and all these different people. And, there's not many left. There's like Ubisoft and EA, and now EA is going private. So I just, I don't know. I hope for the best for all of them. Speaking of EA, it's getting pushed back. That deal, the acquisition for $55 billion, that's going to saddle them with $20 billion in debt, is being pushed back on by employees, unions, and lawmakers. Just here in this last week, ever since the announcement, Richard Blumenthal and Elizabeth Warren, who are two Democrat politicians in the United States, as well as the United Video Game Workers Union, have all come out and been pretty vocal against this deal. So, there's, from the government side, there's concerns that it could be like dangerous from a like propaganda or just like an intellectual property kind of side. From the union, they're obviously worried about it because it's going to lead to layoffs. In regular times, in a normal world, I would tell you that pushback from enough of these groups would potentially not allow this deal to go through. If this was still the last administration and Lena Khan was still the the FTC head, and after she got embarrassed and the really bad handling of the Xbox deal and all that, maybe they would put a stop to this and not allow it to happen. Considering one of the investors that's involved in this EA acquisition is like literally the husband of one of the president's children, I'm going to throw it out there and guess this deal isn't going to get any actual pushback from anyone who can actually stop it. So all of it's going to be all for naught. And the, I guess, pessimistic side of me as well sees that, like, say this deal didn't go through. Say the FTC did block it, and there's no reason this would happen. The United States is trying to cozy up with all the people who are involved in this. And so I don't think nothing's gonna happen. If it did, my honest take is that EA would still slash and burn anyways. All the things that they are probably starting to plan to do now, whether it's selling studios, selling IP, doing mass layoffs, shutting down studios, anything that they're planning to do now that they're going to have to do if this acquisition happens, I would be like 99% willing to bet that, say the deal gets blocked, there's always a chance that someone could get cold feet. The investment groups, maybe something happens with tax, with like interest rates or something, and that they don't like, or say EA gets cold feet because maybe Battlefield 6 is a gigantic boon and they maybe don't need to do this acquisition anymore. I don't know what all the language is and what the laws are and rules and all that, what the agreements are even, but like maybe someone gets cold feet and pulls out of this. But if that happens, I think it's going to be devastating either way. At this point, I suspect those gears are moving and they're not going to stop, no matter what happens with this deal. And man, that's a not very fun place to be in. So I think it's good for these people to speak out, especially the unions, to speak out against this stuff and to kind of warn people what could happen if this acquisition happens. I guess maybe the realist side of me thinks that that's already done and that those things are going to happen. Glen Schofield, legendary Dead Space creator, claims that Call of Duty is suffering under Microsoft. This statement was kind of interesting to me just because I have just no respect for this dude at all. I appreciate something he created 20 years ago. But I think for me, what really killed it for him, and my like good feelings on him, was that he, made this new studio that made a game that was kind of like just a worse version of Dead Space, and really leaned on that. Like, hey, look, I'm the guy who made Dead Space and here's more Dead Space, right? Even though it really wasn't. And I'll never forget when I think it was Summer Game Fest. It could have been the Game Awards before that game came out. And Glen Schofield might as well have gone on stage with Jeff Keighley, gotten down on his knees, and just started blowing. Like, sorry if you're listening to this, and whatever that would be. I'll try to mark this episode 18 plus. But he might as well have just, like, it was one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen a grown man do to try to just, like, I don't know, gain favor from this little dork wearing his $400 shoes. Like, it was so weird. Like, he didn't even talk about their game. Like he has this new studio, this new game is coming out. It was like kind of hyped up. People were kind of excited for it. And instead of talking about the game, he just groveled to Jeff Keighley for like 10 minutes. It was super weird. I'm sure I'm exaggerating, but still. And then the game came out and it was like, okay, it didn't really do that well. It hardly sold at all. And within like months of the game coming out, the studio he founded, Glen Schofield, to make this game, he bounced. He just left them. He took off. And then he went on to talk later on to be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to come back to the industry, and was like doing all these like boomer complaints about the industry and all that. And like, but like literally the game didn't sell like crazy. It was their first game from a new studio. It didn't sell 20 million copies. So he just bounced and left all these people holding their nuts, And it just, I don't know. I just have no respect for this dude. He also was on some podcast before the game came out. And just the way he just came off as so fake and so artificial. And like, he also seemed like he kind of knew the game wasn't going to do that well, but was still trying to keep a good face on it. And it was just like, I don't know, there's just something so weak and so annoying about him, like groveling to the people who don't need to be groveled to, doing this thing and hyping it up. And then the second it didn't meet his expectations, he just bounced and left all these people behind. I think his studio still exists, but they went in, they did some weird stuff with that IP. They made like a fighting game or something with it. I don't know. I suspect that's going to be another one of those stories of those 2020 studios, like I talked about. But yeah, like I don't think anyone really cares about what Glen Schofield thinks about Call of Duty under Microsoft. I suspect that that for better or worse, plenty of copies of that game are going to get sold every year. And if Black Ops 6 is any indication, that they're handling it just fine. That was a really great game. Remedy has issued a profit warning to their investors after their recent co-op live service game, FBC Firebreak, has failed to find an audience. This game has been really interesting. So Remedy is who made like Control, Alan Wake, all those games. So a year ago or so, maybe earlier this year, they announced this FBC Firebreak, which is a like co-op first-person game that takes place in the same universe as Control. It's specifically Control. I believe it even takes place in the building that game takes place in. I forget what it's called, but takes place there. It's also in the Alan Wake universe, which had Alan Wake 2 come out, last year, I believe. And I remember when they announced this, and I just remember being like, who's asking for this? like cool, Remedy, neat studio. I loved Alan Wake 2. I actually don't like Control that much. I hate the way that game plays. And it's just like one of those games that's just like weird for the sake of being weird. It's got like kind of Kojima vibes to me a little bit, where Alan Wake 2 is definitely like that as well. But I don't know. It just grabbed me more. But I'm not like a huge Remedy stan. And when they announced this game and then they showed it, I'm like, this doesn't really seem to be targeting your audience, like the people who buy your games. But like I talked about with PlayStation, every single one of these publishers, which they are a publisher, they've published games that they didn't even make, for better or worse. I just don't know who this game was for. Like, and that seems to have happened. So the game came out, it found no audience, it was pretty rough. And then just recently they did this big reboot update of like, FBC Firebreak 2.0 basically. And they changed a bunch of the things people complained about, and they're hoping that it would be this big rejuvenation to the player base and people would get into it. And for all intents and purposes, from what I've read, the updates were really good. They made the game way better, way more fun, way more what people actually would want, but no one wants it. And so it found no significant change in their player base. And now they're in this weird situation where they spent all this time on Alan Wake 2, and which didn't sell that well. We know, probably didn't even make its money back even at this point. They've spent all this money and time on this FBC Firebreak, on making a very different game than they're used to making, a first-person shooter, a multiplayer game. Like all the infrastructure, all the work on that was probably extremely expensive. And it just didn't go anywhere. Like it's not going anywhere. And so this is one of those weird situations where I'm sure Remedy is just fine, I hope, but there could be a story that could come out tomorrow and be like, yep, Remedy's like going under. And it wouldn't be that surprising. Their assets would get bought up. All those people would be fine. Like for the most part, everyone would survive, right? But like that would suck, man. Like even though I'm not really into their games, I'm not a big Remedy, stan, I still am glad they're in the industry. But then like doing some of these kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is these kind of like unforced errors. I get the logic because live service games can make you so much money with little effort, but now you're on like a roll of like multiple games that haven't done that well. And that's how like publishers disappear and studios disappear. So I'm hoping the best for Remedy. I'm hoping that, they're in better condition than maybe I think they are, but this is probably something to keep an eye on. And finally, we have Jeff Keighley has announced Summer Game Fest 2026 for June 5th in LA. Look, if you've been around, if you've just listened to this podcast, you may realize that I am not the biggest Jeff Keighley fan. At the end of the day, I'm glad that there's someone out there trying to do the things that he's doing. I just, in the wake of E3 disappearing, essentially, and no one truly taking over that mantle, even though a lot of people have given him that. Even I don't think he's earned it, to be totally honest. I just, he talked so much smack, and even while E3 was still happening, but especially after it was gone, and would always, like, whenever they would announce something, he would always announce something at the same time, and it was just this like really petty situation. And he probably had legitimate beef with them. He ran E3 essentially for a lot of time. That eventually that relationship broke up because I guess they weren't willing to change enough, and he wanted to change, and blah blah blah. But what has happened since then is, like, the Game Awards are okay, but they're twice as long as they should be. They seem to be twice as expensive as they need to be. And that's just kind of like a pattern with him. So, like, what happens is he has like Summer Game Fest and Gamescom, Opening Night Live, and the Game Awards. And what happens is there's this like weird, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost the way people treat like Nintendo. It's like so many journalists and content creators and influencers in the games industry are so scared to make Nintendo mad because they know that they'll be in Nintendo jail and they will never get anything from Nintendo ever again. So I think you pretty obviously see a lot of people pull their punches on Nintendo. I think you see that with Jeff Keighley as well. Like, every time he does an event, you just see people falling over themselves to be like, oh, wow. And then he'll put out like, we had 8 billion viewers on the last Game Awards. And everyone's like, whoa, that's crazy. Even though, like, it clearly makes no sense. Like the metrics and stuff that he throws out all the time are clearly inflated. Like, engagement numbers are just being counted in a probably very convenient way, right? Because it just so happens that every year he like doubles viewership somehow, even though the shows like are arguably not very good. And I digress. What's interesting here is that, like, I've talked for a long time about how, all these commercials he shows, which is my main complaint, commercials and game trailers that are clearly just ads, right? He's clearly taking in, we got a clue years ago that he was taking like $250,000 or more to show ads on his show. And while at the same time, people always do this, like, well, he has to show ads to put this together. It's like the profit margin on these shows for him is, I suspect it's pretty good. He's not scraping by with like a 5% off the top. Like, I suspect he's doing much better than that. And so I've always said, like, well, he should make the show more sustainable, make it cheaper. Maybe I don't know. So let's just throw a number out there. Say he spends $500,000 on one of these shows. And therefore he needs to make, $1 million for it to be worth it for him or whatever. I don't know. Maybe you don't. like maybe you don't need to pay these guests to show up who don't care about this at all. Maybe you don't need to have a theater with 10,000 people in it. Maybe you don't need to do this and that and the other. And that might be what's happening here. So one of the interesting things about this announcement is that he announced that the show is going to be at the Dolby Theater in LA. It's still in LA, still means it's going to be super insanely expensive. But the Dolby Theater, from what I could find, is about a 3,000 seat venue, where the YouTube Theater, where he used to do it, is about 7,000 seats. So he's clearly downsizing in some capacity. And I kind of wonder, and if he's actually doing it, if the show also happens to be shorter, have less clear ads, to be more about the games and announcing new games and promoting the industry, cool. I'll give him his flowers for sure. I don't have faith in that. I suspect it's still going to be 3 hours long with 2.5 hours of fluff. But I don't know. I think that detail, though, about the Dolby Theater being used instead of the YouTube one is probably pretty telling on what's been happening, and how, despite all of his, bragging about the engagement numbers and stuff like that, I'm willing to bet that maybe it's not quite as big and as successful as he may portray at times. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's just, maybe this is a way for him to make more money off of it. I have no idea. And we will jump into some content updates. So I will be streaming Battlefield 6, Arc Raiders, and Outer Worlds 2 once it comes out at the end of the month. I've been trying to get on at least once or twice a week, and so far I've been pretty successful. This gets into a time of the year where I get to be, have a little more time on my hands and stuff like that. I do plan on streaming on N7 Day, the Mass Effect celebration on November 7th. I looked back and they mostly started to release info whenever they had it around like noon Eastern time. So my plan is to probably jump on November 7th around 11 a.m. Eastern time here in the States. And we'll just kind of hang out until they release stuff. And when they release it, we'll look at it and we'll talk about it. We'll analyze it, and then we'll, go from there. So keep an eye out for that. I will be announcing, more details on that stuff soon. I have Mass Effect videos rolling out now. I've made my kind of like everything we know about Mass Effect 5 videos. I actually made 2 of them. I split them up. So I have a video about all the blogs and some of the news articles. I put that up a week or 2 ago. And then I have a video just about the teasers and the trailers and stuff that came out earlier this week. Those are both up on my page. I'll be kind of promoting those over the next, 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today, when I'm recording this is when N7 Day is. So, keep an eye out for all of that if you're interested. And then we do have the Game Awards coming up, I believe, in December. So I'll stream that. I'll moan and groan about it. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry. Even though I complain about his stuff all the time, it's still one of the main things to talk about. And the Game Awards, I actually think could be interesting this year because I think there is the slightest possibility that, much like the Series X, how it got announced at the Game Awards back in 2019, I guess, I suspect that if we're getting an Xbox in 2026, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they announce it at the Game Awards as like a tease, and then at their own event in early 2026, they'll do more of a showcase of what's coming. So that's just a bit of some hopium from me. And that is where we will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members or Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, hit me up on social media at Bondiesel or at the Baunfire. Join my Discord via the Linktree link in the description of the episode, or comment on Spotify or YouTube. Yep, on Spotify, I don't get it, but you can do it and I'll reply. So go ahead and try it out. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.